Good everyone, welcome to this video. Today we have a Should You Talisman episode on the PBY-5A Catalina. Now we've already covered the regular PBY-5 Catalina in this series, so we're going to be a little less in-depth for this one. If you want a little bit more in-depth, go watch the PBY-5 Catalina, because I don't really want to repeat myself, because this is basically the same aircraft, bar one exception, which of course we'll cover. Before I begin, in the description below there's the usual timestamps where we cover the weapons and armor of the aircraft, the flight performance, the competition of the aircraft, and finally come to a conclusion. So if you wish to go and skip ahead to the respective parts, please do feel free. But without further ado, let's get into the PBY-5A Catalina's armor, weaponry, and of course its bombs that it can carry. The weaponry, of course, being the most important factor of an aircraft in this game for most people, is because without a decent bit of armament on a large aircraft such as this, well, I say large, there are obviously bigger planes, but for the BR, this thing's quite big. It's obviously quite important to assess the armament of the aircraft, of course. And this thing is no exception. Of course, it's exactly the same as the other one we've already covered in the series, which is right here. Same armament, same guns, same armor profile. But we will still cover it in some sort of detail. So, of course, the blister guns are the 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns. You get a single one on each side with 478 rounds of ammunition. You have pretty good coverage with this. They buffed it about a year and a half ago, and it is quite nice. Like, the overall coverage is really good. And obviously the blister gun on the other side shares the exact same thing. And you get a decent bit of ammo, which can definitely help out. And with the coverage, you can definitely do some drive-bys on people, and it is quite hilarious, I must admit. And believe me, I've gotten more than my fair share of kills with the drive-by. In the lower gun, you have a single 30 caliber machine gun, which used to be a 50 caliber machine gun. I mentioned this in the PBY-5 Catalina as well. And I kind of miss that, but if it's historically accurate, then, well, we kind of have to live with it, unfortunately. And of course, the nose gun is another 7.62, which of course is not great, but it does have pretty good coverage angles, and you can quite easily get shots off on people who are approaching. Or if you want, you can tail set a bomber that has no real defensive armament, and you can actually shoot them down with a 30 cal. It might take a while, but it is possible. In terms of the armor, it's pretty much exactly the same as the PBY-5, with the armor being 9.5 at its thickest, around the pilot's chairs and the front gunner's position. There's a little bit of armor up here, there's a little bit of armor up here, which will not help you in any way, shape, or form. But this little bit of armor can potentially stop a bullet from hitting the gunner here. But of course, these side blisters do not have any, well, they don't have any protection, as you can tell. All they have is just an open blister, which is very easy to shoot in. The only real defense they have is the machine gun itself, which, if they get hit too much, it will break the machine gun, so just bear that in mind. In terms of the engines, they're exactly the same as the other Catalina that we've covered in this series, which is the R18 3092. Decent bit of horsepower, but obviously it is quite a bit it is quite a big aircraft, so you got to bear that in mind. And its acceleration is not very good, because obviously it's a float plane, it's not exactly designed to be a racer. The climb rate of this aircraft is also extremely poor, especially when you fully load this thing with bomb load. And yeah, this just doesn't really help it. Now, why is this aircraft set at 1.7 as opposed to 1.3? Well, I think it's because more people tend to play the 5A version because of its more versatile landing capabilities and all that jazz, but I really can't think of why the 5 is set at 1.3 and this is at 1.7. Same with the British Catalina, the Russian Catalina, and the new-ish French Catalina. I don't understand it, and to be brutally honest, I really think these things should just go down to 1.3. They've never really been seal clubby. Sure, they have pretty high win rates because people just four-man squad these things, but you know, that's not really what I would say is great, but, you know. Overall, though, it's pretty much exactly the same. The bomb loads, of course, are exactly the same as well. You get 2 torpedoes as well. as I've said, but 16 100-pounders, 4 500-pounders, 4 naval mines, which are incredible, and the 4 1,000-pound bombs. So overall, you have pretty good armament. It's just the fact that, as I say, we've covered it already, so it's a bit, not as interesting. But of course, as you can tell, the main difference is we're not on the water. We have landing gear, so that is the one major difference, but other than that, not really much to talk about here. And, well, whilst the armament is good, yeah, not exactly groundbreaking. Anyway, let's head into the test flight and let's see how this aircraft does. See you shortly. And welcome to the test flight. Now, just because we have landing gear doesn't mean Gaijin's going to give us an air spawn, so as per usual, with the first Catalina, it will take us a bit to get going, but whilst we're doing that, I can demonstrate the coverage angles of this aircraft, which, as you can tell, is pretty good. And even the 30 cal can join the party if someone's getting in on your sides. It's not bad at all. Of course, being a big, heavy airplane, it is quite cumbersome to fly. And the oil systems are quite large. There's actually 2 oil coolers. It is quite vulnerable to damage. The engines are very vulnerable to fires, which can be quite detrimental. But same as with last time, nothing really changes. The roll rate is very sluggish. The rudder response is very sluggish because, again, this is a very large aircraft. The elevators, whilst they are pretty alright, they can be easily used too much and you can snap the airframe in half, which a lot of people still do that to this day. And, well, it's just not really, different from the other Catalina we've covered, and unfortunately that's its problem. Well, I say it's its problem, it's not its problem, because how was it meant to know I was going to get a talisman on it? But the bombs do drop separately, just like the other Catalina, and, well, you do get the extra versatility of landing this plane on the runways if you need to. But the thing is you can do that already with this plane because you have the float, which you can just land it on that. You don't need the landing gear. So the one major difference between this and the other Catalina pretty much is useless. I mean, sure, if you want to be more authentic, I suppose, that is an option, but if you pull this thing too hard, the landing gear's extra strength in the hull doesn't exactly help the wings. And as I've mentioned, whilst you can still somewhat fly this thing with a wingtip gone, the fact is, I'm now considered dead and out of the match. Obviously, we're not in a match, but you get my point. Now, sure, it can actually handle this quite well, but why would you, go 0.4 of a BR higher for simply having landing gear? There's no point. So, and not only that, you could run into BF-109 E3s, which will butcher you if you're not careful. But, I digress. And like I say, it's very easy to rip this thing apart. There's nothing really to talk about. So, on that basis, I'm going to head us back to the hangar, and I will see you shortly. And welcome back to the hangar. As you can probably expect, we're not going to be here for too long, because, as I say, we covered it last time in the PBY-5A Catalina. Once again, the TBD-1 continues to be still pretty strong for this. I mean, you can kill 2.5 base with this bloody thing alone, and you get a 50 cal, and you get decent maneuverability, and you don't have to worry about a wing snapping in a tight turn. You do have to worry about it in a dive, but so does the Catalina, and the Catalina has it worse. In terms of everything else, excuse me there, the F3F continues to be the dominant one for fighters, same with the P-36A and the C. These are really going to be your bread and butter. Obviously, we've already reviewed the BF-2C1 Goshawk, which I don't recommend putting a talisman on this thing. Whilst it is fun, it is definitely not as strong as something like the 50 cal Pea Shooter. So if you really want a reserve aircraft, just pick the Pea Shooter or the 50 cal. It's not hard. You get better performance, you get a better engine overall handling and everything. And having a 50 cal at 1.0 when you can meet tanks with less side armor than the 50 cal Pen. It's kind of bad shit, and also the M2P shooter now can drop its bombs separately, same with the F3F. So, yeah. And if you want to play a larger strategic bomber, just fly the one at 1.3. You pretty much trade a few miles an hour top speed in the 5A for no real difference. Sure, as I said, if you want to be authentic and you want to land this thing properly, that is something you can do. But that brings us to the conclusion. If you really want to talisman one of the Catalinas, just pick the lower BR one. Like, seriously, there is no reason to put this one with a talisman. And, like I said, the TBD, if you want to do bombing, is arguably more consistent because it can actually fight back and everything, even with a full bomb load on. And, to me, the regular 5 Catalina has better time in the matchmaking at the minute. This tends to get 2.7 matches, which, to put that in perspective, this thing can potentially run into an I-29. And we've just had Real Shatter fixed about a week and a half ago. So yeah, I would, well, a week and a half ago as I record this, mind you. So I would definitely not talisman this one. It is one that just really has no benefit over the PBY-5. Unless, as I said, you like having a bit of authenticity while like actually landing the damn thing. But just land it on the damn float and it doesn't really matter. So yeah, unfortunately, that's my conclusion for the PBY-5A Catalina. Next up in the series is going to be one that I think everyone and their mothers is going to enjoy. The Dauntless. And, well, this is definitely going to be getting a positive one, that's for sure. Anyway, I'll leave you all to it for today. I hope you enjoyed seeing the PBY-5A Catalina getting its fair share of, shall we say, criticism. And, of course, I will hand you over to the rest of your day, and I will see you all on the next one.